Hello again. Sometimes I wonder if we're living in the 21st century because we seem to have first century leaders who use subterfuge, chicanery, deception, stratagem, and cheating. And all of these words describes the way governments operate. And it's not just in England either. Um, do we believe that the figureheads who appear before us are actually in charge? Are they? Don't be fooled by it. The people who are actually in charge are the money people, the banks, big pharma, big tech, billionaires, and all the clubs they belong to. Biden, Trudeau, Sunak, Macron, Schultz are just puppets to these institutions that they are closely followed by the fatuous glitterati of fame and fortune, the celebrity narcissist who stand in front of the mirrors of vanity while entertaining us as we, the normies, are being relieved of our freedom. England is slightly different and is mostly run by 600,000 civil servants. Yeah, 600,000. Look it up. But they still operate under the same regime of influence. You only have to watch the satirical TV series called Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister, a perfect example of what goes on behind closed doors, and was a favourite of Margaret Thatcher. And probably because she knew it was accurate, and it was accurate in describing the workings of the establishment. But even that structure is run by the same big club, and you're not in it. I was never really interested in politics. I always left that for the intellectuals and old men. Well, I've arrived and not surprised because human behaviour is very often disappointing, to say the very least. And discovering what is really going on in this world is a bit like being in a long-term relationship only to find out that you weren't. And that just maybe you were being used by others to get what they wanted. But boy, have we been used by successive politicians over the years. And we've always been controlled by many, many means. But in the last few years, it has become almost dictatorial, with form groups like SAGE. I'm sure you must have heard of SAGE. It's the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, perfectly named the Nudge Unit by those of us who are aware of what is going on. Don't be fooled by the innocent name of SAGE. On this board sat at least one communist and probably 3 or 4 psychologists. Why psychologists? It's easy to manipulate and cause fear, and they could not believe how successful they were, and it actually had influence globally. And that was really, really scary. But most people just cowed into submission and accepted their fate and took what they was advised to take. Good luck with that. Now, there's an excellent book by a Professor Matthias Desmet. He's a Belgian professor. And it's called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, where he describes something called mass formation psychosis. And that is what the whole world went through in 2020, instigated by SAGE and the computer modelling of Professor Neil Ferguson. That brought you lockdown. He later resigned over breaking the very rules he made with his coding by visiting his mistress during those lockdowns, knowing full well it was safe to do so, along with Boris's parties and Dominic Cummings, founder of Vote Leave, remember him? And his visit to Barnard Castle to test his eyesight during lockdown, and his later monologue in the Rose Garden of Number 10 to give his excuses. He eventually resigned and turned on Boris. But did you know he was an advisor to Sunak? No, not many people do know that. Amazingly, Ferguson's computer coding was also responsible for the slaughter of millions and millions of animals during the 2001 foot and mouth crisis. Many say it was gross overreaction and mostly unnecessary, and it ruined many, many people. But let me just remind you who the Prime Minister was then. Yeah, Tony bloody Blair, war criminal extraordinaire, and should be in jail. And in my opinion, the very epitome of evil. And he's the man who said we needed education, education, education. And what do we get? We got universities that indoctrinate, indoctrinate, indoctrinate. That's true. If you really want to know what's going on in this world, follow the money, not the science. While you were locked down and miserable, many people were making millions. Never ever forget that. And I'm not going to send these videos anymore, but if you'd like to listen, then just push the subscribe button and then the little bell, and you will get all them if you want them. They will also be on my blog, and the link will be under more in descriptions to this video. One last thing I need to say that happened the other day. Just a few doors away lives a Polish guy. Hard-working man with a tiny little family. Nice people. And he stopped me and he ranted on for about 5 minutes about Putin, how dangerous he was, and wished him dead. Because that's the way a lot of Polish people feel, but they seem to forget history. I waited until he'd finished and I said, "Excuse me, my father died in Stalingrad fighting the Nazis, and Putin is doing exactly the same in Ukraine. You need to realise that Putin is a moderate in Russia, and if he is killed or deposed, there are far more radical people waiting to take over. Just be careful about what you wish for. It may come true." I lied about my father, but he got my point, apologised and walked off. Thanks for listening.